I've lived in Oak Ridge subdivision for nearly 7 years now, and if you asked me how many peaceful weeks I've had since moving in, I could count them on one hand. When my wife and I first bought this place, I thought we'd finally found the dream home: quiet neighborhood, big maple trees lining the street, kids riding their bikes until sunset, and that soft golden light that made everything look like a Norman Rockwell painting. But it didn't take long before I learned that behind all that suburb charm was something far darker, an HOA with more rules than common sense, and at the center of it all was the self-proclaimed queen of the community, Karen Langston. Karen wasn't just any HOA board member. No, she was the kind who thought she owned the whole neighborhood, the kind who made it her life's mission to patrol everyone's property like a self-appointed sheriff of suburbia. You couldn't leave your garbage cans out for more than 10 minutes without her snapping a picture. Paint your door the wrong shade of beige, and she'd have a violation notice taped up before the paint even dried. But her obsession with control wasn't limited to the yards and fences of Oak Ridge, it extended right up to my mailbox. Now, my mailbox wasn't even inside the HOA boundary technically. See, my house sat at the very edge of the subdivision. When the developers built the neighborhood, they accidentally placed the line just a few feet short of the last property, mine. Which meant technically, the HOA had no jurisdiction over me. No power, no say, no control. And that drove Karen absolutely insane. From the first week I moved in, she made it clear she didn't like the fact that she couldn't boss me around like everyone else. She'd make little comments whenever she saw me. "It's funny you don't have the HOA-issued mailbox, dear. You really should standardize for the neighborhood look. Or, it wouldn't hurt to let me handle your landscaping approvals, we like to keep things uniform around here." Uniform. That was her favorite word. To her, individuality was chaos, creativity was rebellion, and anything that didn't match the HOA's approved aesthetic was an act of war. And since I didn't pay their dues or answer to their nonsense, I was public enemy number one. It started small. A glare when I'd mow my lawn at a non-approved hour. A complaint that my mailbox, a sturdy black post style with my last name, Fletcher, etched on the side, didn't match the rest of the subdivision's dainty white mailboxes with gold trim. Then she began trespassing. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Maybe she was just walking her little dog, a yappy Pomeranian that looked more like a feather duster than a pet. But one morning, I caught her red-handed. It was early, around 6:30 a.m. I was making coffee when I noticed movement outside. I looked through the blinds and saw her standing by my mailbox, clipboard in hand, peering inside like she was expecting to find contraband. She'd even propped open the lid and was scribbling something down. I stepped outside, and she jumped like a kid caught stealing cookies. "Karen," I said, still half asleep, "what the hell are you doing?" She gave that tight, fake smile of hers, the kind you can hear even when you can't see her face. "Oh, good morning, Mr. Fletcher. I was just checking your mailbox. It's a bit of an eyesore, And I believe it's encroaching on community property." I blinked. "It's a mailbox, Karen. On my property. And you're trespassing." "Oh, don't be silly," she said, waving her hand like she was brushing away a fly. "This section of land falls under HOA maintenance. We can't have non-standard boxes ruining the neighborhood's visual appeal." I pointed at the survey marker near the edge of my driveway. "That's my property line. You're standing on my side." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't move. "You'll be hearing from us," she said, scribbling something on her clipboard and storming off like she'd just filed an official act of war. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail, not from the HOA's legal department, mind you, but a notice of noncompliance signed by Karen herself. It demanded that I replace my mailbox with an HOA-approved model or face administrative action. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my beer. Administrative action? Against someone not even in their HOA? It was ridiculous. I ignored it. Weeks went by, and she got bolder. I'd find her lingering around the edge of my driveway, snapping pictures of my yard. Once, I caught her measuring my mailbox post with a tape measure. Another time, she actually unscrewed the little decorative flag from the side, claiming it violated neighborhood standards. It was infuriating. I tried talking to the HOA board directly, but they all acted like she was untouchable. "You're technically outside our jurisdiction," one of them said on the phone. "But Karen feels your property affects the overall look of Oak Ridge, and, well, she can be quite persistent." Persistent was an understatement. It felt like every week she found a new excuse to meddle. I put up a small solar light near the mailbox. Improper lighting. I added a small nameplate. Non-compliant signage. Every little thing became a battleground. And every time I thought she'd finally move on to harassing someone else, she came back, clipboard, camera, and attitude in hand. One day I decided enough was enough. I installed a motion camera near the mailbox, not a visible one, but small and discreet, tucked beneath a shrub. Within 48 hours, I had footage of her opening my mailbox, not once, not twice, but 3 times in one day. That's a federal crime, tampering with someone's mail. I took the footage straight to the local post office, and the postmaster didn't find it funny. He promised to send a warning to the HOA, but Karen must have laughed it off, because 2 days later, she was right back at it. That's when the idea first crossed my mind, a harmless, poetic little form of revenge. I wasn't the kind of guy to escalate things usually, but she had pushed me past the point of patience. And I figured if she was so obsessed with sticking her nose where it didn't belong, maybe I could give her a reason to stop. Now, I'm a handyman by trade. I build things, fix things, and when I get time, I tinker with small mechanical projects. A couple of years back, I built a custom beehive setup for a local beekeeper buddy of mine, and he taught me a lot about honeybees, how they behave, how to handle them safely, and how to build enclosures that keep them calm. So when I saw him again at the farmer's market one weekend, I jokingly mentioned my Karen problem. He laughed and said, "Man, if you want to keep people out of something, nothing beats bees." That line stuck with me. I started thinking, maybe there was a way to use his advice. Not in a cruel way, not to hurt anyone, but just to send a message. A message Karen wouldn't soon forget. So one weekend, while my wife was visiting her sister, I got to work. I took apart the lower section of my mailbox and built a small false compartment underneath, big enough for a few honeycombs and maybe half a dozen bees. I used a thin mesh so air could circulate, and made sure the bees couldn't actually escape unless someone yanked the mailbox door open hard. It was safe, harmless, and totally contained. My beekeeper friend even lent me a small vial of calm, non-aggressive bees, the kind used for controlled pollination. I waited. For 2 days, nothing happened. I started thinking maybe she'd finally gotten bored. But on the 3rd morning, I saw that familiar figure, pastel sweater, sun visor, and that little Pomeranian, marching straight toward my mailbox. Clipboard in hand. I grabbed my coffee and stepped onto the porch, pretending not to notice her. She bent over, peeked inside the mailbox, and, as usual, popped the door open without hesitation. What happened next was pure, cinematic gold. The moment the door flipped open, a faint buzzing filled the air. Karen froze. Then a blur of yellow and black darted out, and her calm, condescending face twisted into panic. She screamed, a high-pitched, glass-shattering scream, and stumbled backward, waving her arms as half a dozen bees hovered around her. She dropped her clipboard, tripped over her dog's leash, and fell right into the grass. I couldn't help it, I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. The bees didn't sting her, they just buzzed around for a few seconds before flying off. But Karen? You'd have thought she was being attacked by a swarm of hornets. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed her dog, and bolted back toward her house, still flailing like a cartoon character. The best part? I got it all on camera. The video of Karen's bee encounter became, without question, one of the greatest private entertainments of my life. I must have replayed it 20 times that night, every time laughing harder than the last. My wife, Claire, came home Sunday evening to find me with a beer in hand and tears streaming down my face from laughter. When I showed her the footage, she almost spit out her wine. "You didn't actually hurt her, right?" she asked between laughs. I assured her the bees were harmless, calm pollinators, no stingers engaged unless provoked. "So technically," I said, grinning, "I just helped her get in touch with nature." Claire shook her head. "You know this is going to cause trouble, right?" "Oh, I'm counting on it," I said. Sure enough, trouble came, wrapped in passive-aggressive emails, printed notices, and one very awkward confrontation the next morning. Around 9 a.m., there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Karen was standing there, red-faced, arms crossed, with her little dog tucked under her arm like a furry football. Her visor was missing, probably a casualty of the bee incident, and her hair looked like she'd just survived a wind tunnel. "Good morning, Karen," I said, unable to hide the smirk. She glared at me like I'd kicked her car. "Don't you good morning me, Mr. Fletcher. You think this is funny?" I leaned casually against the doorframe. "Depends what this is. You trespassing again? Or maybe you mean the bees that decided to set up near my mailbox. Nature's unpredictable that way." She jabbed a finger toward the street. "You set a trap. I could have been killed. I'm allergic to bees." "Then maybe," I said slowly, "you shouldn't be opening other people's mailboxes." For a second, I thought she might actually explode. Her face twisted, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right combination of words that could express her fury. Finally, she shouted, "You're going to regret this. The HOA will not tolerate this kind of behavior," and stormed off. Her dog barked the whole way down my driveway, like a tiny echo of her outrage. Later that afternoon, I found a new notice taped to my mailbox, again. This one was printed on HOA letterhead, which she clearly designed herself, since it had her signature flourish at the bottom, and accused me of maintaining hazardous wildlife within proximity to the community. I laughed out loud. Hazardous wildlife. Like I'd trained a bear to guard the mailbox or something. I ignored it, of course. But then she started escalating in other ways. The next week, a county animal control officer showed up at my door. "We received a report of dangerous bees being kept without permit," he said. I nearly choked trying to hold back a laugh. I invited him to look around. He examined the mailbox, saw that there were no bees anywhere nearby, and left shaking his head, muttering something about crazy HOA people. Then came a complaint to the Postal Service again, this time claiming I had booby-trapped my mailbox. That one earned me a stern visit from a postal inspector, but when I showed him the camera footage, both of Karen trespassing and the harmless release of the bees, he couldn't help but chuckle. "Sir," he said, "I can't officially condone this, but that's one way to stop a nosy neighbor." Still, I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her don't just quit. She thrived on control, on the illusion of authority. And now that illusion was shattered, by bees, no less. For a while, she went quiet. Weeks passed with no new notes, no angry knocks, no trespassing at dawn. It was blissful. I started to think maybe she'd learned her lesson, that she'd moved on to terrorizing someone else about their fence color or trash can placement. I even took down the hidden camera. Then, one morning, I stepped outside and saw that my mailbox flag was bent sideways, snapped at the hinge. At first, I thought maybe it was just the wind, until I noticed a smear of something sticky across the top. Honey. Not just a little, a full handful, dripping down the side. That's when I realized, Karen was retaliating. I stood there for a solid minute, staring at my honey-coated mailbox, torn between outrage and amusement. It was petty, hilariously petty, but also infuriating. So, she wanted to play that game? Fine. Two can play. That night, I cleaned off the honey, polished the box, and installed the camera again, this time with night vision and a direct feed to my phone. If she came near my property again, I'd know. And I didn't have to wait long. The following evening, around 10:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the app, and sure enough, there she was. Karen, in a bathrobe, sneakers, and a headlamp like some deranged suburban archaeologist, tiptoeing down the street with a jar in her hand. She crouched by my mailbox, muttering to herself, and smeared what looked like peanut butter across the door. Peanut butter. I couldn't believe it. Was she trying to bait animals now? Or maybe she thought the bees were still there and wanted revenge? Either way, it was crossing the line. I called out through the front door before she could scurry off. Karen, you need a hobby. She screamed, dropped the jar, and ran like she'd seen a ghost. I had the whole thing on video. And that's when the real fun began. The next morning, I uploaded a short, carefully edited version of the footage to a local neighborhood Facebook group, not the HOA's official one, but the independent one that half the residents used to vent about Karen. I titled it, Wildlife Spotting, Suburban Sasquatch Sighting. The comments section exploded. OMG, is that Karen? She's spreading peanut butter again. Bro, I'm crying, the headlamp. Not the dog leash and robe combo skull. Within hours, it had hundreds of likes. Someone even made a meme out of it with the caption, HOA, keeping neighborhoods weird since 1997. Karen must have seen it because later that day, she came storming up my driveway again, this time with two other HOA board members in tow, a balding man named Greg and a woman who always looked like she'd smelled something bad. They tried to look official, clipboards ready, but the embarrassment on their faces was impossible to hide. Mr. Fletcher, Greg began, his voice strained. This has gotten out of hand. You've humiliated Karen publicly, and the HOA is prepared to take legal action if this continues. I raised an eyebrow. Legal action? For posting public footage of someone trespassing on my property in the middle of the night? He hesitated. Well, technically, I interrupted, you guys have no authority over me. I'm not in the HOA. And technically, your friend here has been caught on camera trespassing multiple times. Would you like me to forward that footage to the police? Karen's mouth tightened into a thin, furious line. Greg looked uncomfortable. The other woman mumbled something about needing to review the bylaws, and started backing away. Within minutes, they left, though Karen lingered long enough to hiss, "You haven't heard the last of this, Mr. Fletcher." But in truth, she'd already lost. Because that night, the Facebook post reached nearly everyone in the subdivision. Even people who used to support her began turning against her. The comments were merciless. If she spent half as much time minding her own business as she does inspecting mailboxes, we'd all live in peace, one person wrote. Another said, I thought HOA Karen was a myth, but she's real and she's got peanut butter. It was glorious. Over the next few weeks, her power began to crumble. People stopped attending HOA meetings. A petition started circulating online to remove her from the board. Someone even replaced the HOA's official Facebook banner with a meme of a giant bee buzzing over a mailbox. She must have lost her mind when she saw that. But she didn't go down without one last sting, pardon the pun. One quiet Saturday morning, I was out mowing my lawn when I noticed a pickup truck parked near my curb. 2 county code enforcement officers were standing beside it, talking to Karen. She pointed toward my property, waving her arms dramatically, like she was describing a crime scene. I turned off the mower and walked over. "Morning, officers," I said. The older one nodded politely. "Mr. Fletcher, we received a complaint that you're maintaining an unregistered beekeeping site without permits." I sighed. "Let me guess who called." Karen stood behind them, smirking. "You should have just followed the rules like everyone else." I crossed my arms. "You mean like you did when you opened my federal mailbox?" That wiped the smirk off her face. The officers inspected the area. No bees, no hives, nothing. Just one very clean mailbox and a security camera pointed right at it. They left after 10 minutes, apologizing for the inconvenience. I turned to Karen. "You know, for someone who claims to hate bees, you sure keep poking the hive." She glared. "You think you're clever, don't you? But this neighborhood doesn't forget. You'll see." And with that, she stormed off yet again, her dog trotting behind her like a tiny, judgmental shadow. That night, as I sat on the porch with Claire watching the sunset, I couldn't help but smile. The air was calm, the street was quiet, and for once, no one was snooping around my mailbox. Claire leaned over and said, "You know, you might have just saved this neighborhood from its worst pest." I grinned. And all it took was a few bees. But what I didn't realize then, what none of us realized, was that Karen wasn't finished. Because in her mind, she wasn't the villain of the story. She saw herself as the hero, the defender of order, the guardian of aesthetics, the righteous protector of community standards. And when people like that lose their power, they don't surrender. They plot. And Karen Langston was just getting started. If there's one thing I've learned from living under the constant watch of a suburban tyrant, it's this: when you embarrass someone like Karen Langston, they don't move on. They regroup. They stew in silence, feeding on humiliation until it curdles into obsession. I should have seen it coming, the way she started disappearing from the neighborhood meetings, the hushed whispers when I walked by, the occasional car that slowed a little too long in front of my house. At first, I thought it was just the usual gossip after her meltdown. But soon enough, it became clear, she wasn't done with me. She was just planning her counterattack. For about a month, things were eerily quiet. No more flyers, no more compliance notices, no more middle-of-the-night peanut butter patrols. Even her little dog seemed to vanish from its daily route. The silence felt unnatural, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. Claire noticed it too. "It's too quiet," she said one evening as we sat out on the porch. "She's up to something." I tried to shrug it off. Maybe she finally learned her lesson. Claire arched an eyebrow. "Karen? Learning? That woman's made of spite and hairspray." She wasn't wrong. It started again subtly. One morning, I went to check my mail and found the flag missing. Gone. Not bent this time, completely unscrewed. I figured it was petty vandalism. 2 days later, I found a crumpled HOA newsletter stuffed inside, even though I wasn't on their mailing list. Inside, there was a not-so-subtle message printed on the back: "Unapproved residents create disorder. Order will be restored." Now, that was definitely Karen's work. She had that dramatic flair, like she thought she was leading some dystopian neighborhood uprising. But I wasn't going to let it rattle me. A week later, the escalation took a turn from petty to invasive. I came home from work to find an orange notice stake in my front yard: zoning review pending. I knew exactly what that meant. Someone had filed a complaint with the county, claiming my mailbox or landscaping violated local regulations. It was the same stunt she'd pulled on a dozen homeowners before me. The difference was, again, she had no authority over my property. None. But filing county-level complaints? That was new. She was weaponizing bureaucracy now. I spent the next few days calling the county office to sort it out. Sure enough, someone had reported that my detached mailbox structure exceeded local ordinance height limits. The county official on the phone chuckled when I explained it was a standard 4-foot post with nothing unusual about it. "You wouldn't believe how many of these come from that neighborhood," he said. "Same person every time. Some lady named Karen." I laughed, but it wasn't funny anymore. The woman was relentless, and now, she was trying to use the system to bury me in red tape. So, I decided to return the favor. Not out of revenge exactly, but to protect myself. I started documenting everything, every notice, every visit, every phone call. I printed screenshots of her texts to the HOA board, which leaked to me via sympathetic neighbors, and backed up every bit of footage from my security cameras. I even added a new one, a 180-degree camera facing the mailbox and street, with cloud storage and timestamp logs. By mid-May, I had enough evidence to make a small documentary. Then came the night that confirmed my worst suspicion. It was around 2 a.m., I'd fallen asleep on the couch when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I groggily opened the app, expecting maybe a raccoon or a passing car. But what I saw made me sit upright instantly. There she was, Karen, wearing black yoga pants, a hoodie, and latex gloves, creeping along the sidewalk with a flashlight. She stopped at my mailbox, looked around nervously, then pulled something from her pocket. It looked like a small container, maybe a spray can. She started misting the mailbox door. I zoomed in. The label on the can read, "Bee and Wasp Killer." I couldn't believe it. She was still obsessed with the bees. It had been months, but somehow in her mind, I was harboring an illegal hive. She was committing federal tampering again, and this time with pesticide. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and called the non-emergency police line. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I've got an HOA board member trespassing on my property spraying chemicals into my mailbox right now." "Yes, it's all on camera." By the time a patrol car arrived, she was gone. But the footage was crystal clear, face, license plate, the works. I gave it to the responding officer, who watched the clip twice and sighed. "This lady's a repeat customer, huh?" "You could say that." He shook his head. "Tampering with mail and using chemicals on private property? That's serious. We'll file a report and contact her." The next day, Karen's house was crawling with activity. I saw 2 squad cars parked in front around noon, officers talking to her on the porch while she gestured wildly, probably spinning some tale about rogue bees and neighborhood safety. Later that day, I got a call from the police station confirming they'd issued a citation for trespassing and property damage. Nothing huge, but enough to sting. The reaction was immediate, and delicious. The same neighbors who once avoided taking sides now came out in full support. "It's about time someone stood up to her," one man said as he walked his dog past my house. Another neighbor brought over a 6-pack and toasted me on my porch. But the sweetest moment came when the HOA itself finally had to take action. I received a printed letter, for once, not taped to my mailbox, signed by the remaining board members. It read, "Effective immediately, Karen Langston has been suspended from all HOA duties pending review of her conduct and legal matters. We apologize for any disturbances caused and appreciate your cooperation with community peace efforts." It was over, or so I thought. For a few weeks, the neighborhood was peaceful again. People smiled at each other. The air felt lighter. Without Karen breathing down everyone's necks, Oak Ridge actually became the kind of place it was meant to be. I fixed up my mailbox, added a new coat of paint, and even built a small flower bed around it, complete with lavender and sage, pollinator-friendly plants. It was poetic in a way, the man accused of harboring bees now openly encouraging them. Claire started jokingly calling me the Mailbox Whisperer. Life was good again. Until the anonymous letters started. They came one by one, no return address, typed in blocky font. The first said, "You think you've won, but the neighborhood remembers." The second, "Bees don't live forever. Neither does luck." Claire wanted me to ignore them, but I knew that style, that melodramatic, theatrical nonsense was pure Karen. The way she capitalized random words, the overuse of ellipses, the sense that she thought she was narrating a suspense novel, it was unmistakable. The final letter, though, was different. It wasn't threatening, it was smug. The rules will always return. Even bees can't stop order forever. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. 2 days later, the HOA held a special election. Guess who won her seat back? Yep. Karen Langston. Apparently, she'd convinced enough people that the whole bee incident was a setup, that I'd fabricated the footage, that I was the neighborhood menace, the instigator of digital harassment. I couldn't believe it. She had somehow spun the whole narrative into one where she was the victim. Her return was swift and venomous. Within a week, I got another, friendly notice, claiming that my flower bed was improperly landscaped and inviting bee activity that posed a risk to residents. That was the final straw. This time, I wasn't going to play defense. I contacted a local news reporter, a guy named Jake who ran a segment called Small Town Justice on Channel 7. I sent him everything, the footage, the notices, the police reports, even screenshots of the anonymous letters. He called me the next day, saying, "This is gold. Mind if we do a piece on it?" A week later, there was a camera crew in my yard. Jake interviewed me on the porch while bees buzzed lazily over the lavender. I told the story calmly, factually, no embellishment needed. He even reached out to Karen for comment, but she refused. When the segment aired, it went viral. The headline read, "HOA Harassment, Local Man's Mailbox Becomes Ground Zero for Neighborhood Feud." By the next morning, the video had over 200,000 views online. The comments section was brutal. "Karen is the embodiment of HOA hell. Dude's a hero, finally someone stood up to these control freaks. Justice served with a side of honey." People started sending me bee memes, bee stickers, even a little ceramic bee figurine in the mail. My story had turned into a suburban legend. The HOA panicked. Their inbox overflowed with angry emails from residents and even people outside the neighborhood demanding Karen's removal. The pressure was so intense that within 2 weeks, she resigned voluntarily from the board, for good this time. When the dust finally settled, Oak Ridge became a different place. The new HOA board was reasonable, relaxed. People planted gardens without fear of fines. Kids could play basketball in their driveways again without Karen showing up with a clipboard. As for me, I replaced my old mailbox with a new one, sturdy, elegant, with a small brass bee ornament on top. A little inside joke, a trophy of sorts. I left the lavender blooming, the camera running, and the memories alive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Claire and I sat on the porch again. She handed me a cold beer and said, "So, think she'll ever try anything again?" I looked at the mailbox gleaming in the golden light and smiled. "If she does, I've got plenty more bees." We both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from relief and victory combined. For once, Oak Ridge was quiet, no shouting, no trespassing, no buzzing except from the flowers. But in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that people like Karen never truly disappear. They just wait, watching, plotting their next crusade against whatever doesn't fit their perfect picture. Still, if she ever came back for round 2, she'd find that this time, the hive was ready. After the news segment aired and the dust of the so-called bee war settled, life in Oak Ridge finally began to resemble what it was supposed to be: peaceful, simple, and neighborly. For the first time since moving in, I could walk down the street without feeling like I was under surveillance. People smiled and waved. Some even stopped me just to thank me for standing up to the Queen Bee of the HOA. The nickname stuck faster than honey on toast. Claire joked that I should have put it on a mailbox plaque. "The Hive Keeper," she said one morning as we stood on the porch, watching the early light turn the neighborhood gold. "That's who you are now." I laughed. Better than the HOA's Most Wanted. The air was cleaner, not literally, but spiritually. Neighbors planted wildflowers, put up birdhouses, even painted their mailboxes bright colors. It was like the whole community had collectively decided to rebel against conformity. Oak Ridge had life again. And every time I saw a little bee hovering over my lavender patch, I couldn't help but feel like the world had a sense of humor after all. But peace never lasts forever, not when there's someone like Karen lurking in the background. A few months after her resignation, I began to notice something strange. A new face started appearing at the HOA meetings, a young guy in a crisp polo shirt, hair slicked back, always carrying a tablet. His name was Bryce Langston. The resemblance was unmistakable: same sharp chin, same glare, same way of talking, like the world owed him obedience. Karen's son. Rumor had it she'd convinced him to restore order in Oak Ridge, whispering in his ear about how the neighborhood had fallen into chaos since she left. And Bryce, a real estate agent with a flair for arrogance, loved nothing more than control, just like his mother. At first, he kept things quiet. The HOA sent out friendly reminders about community harmony and visual consistency. Nothing serious, just fluff. But little by little, I could feel the tone shift. New, suggested guidelines started appearing in the newsletters: mailbox maintenance, acceptable garden colors, even driveway decor. It was déjà vu all over again. Then came the kicker. One morning, I found a small envelope in my mail, not a notice, not a flyer, but a handwritten note in neat, block letters. "We haven't forgotten what you did. Some stains don't wash out. BL." I held the note for a moment, the paper trembling slightly between my fingers. Claire saw my face and frowned. "What's that?" "Just proof that Karen's legacy lives on," I muttered, sliding the note into a drawer. I wanted to ignore it. I really did. But the problem with bullies is that if you let them get away with even one thing, they start to believe they can do anything. Within a week, new community standards were announced. And though they were technically optional, Bryce made it clear that residents who fail to comply may face escalated review. It was a direct echo of his mother's words, and everyone knew it. People started whispering again. "He's just like her. He's taking it too far. Fletcher's not going to stand for this." And they were right. I didn't want another war. But when Bryce started citing my property in his public examples of non-compliance, it was clear he'd declared one. The newsletter actually featured a blurred photo of my lavender bed with the caption, "Potential allergen sources near mailboxes, discouraged for community safety." Claire saw it and groaned. "Oh, here we go again." But this time, I wasn't going to fill my mailbox with bees. No, that trick had already made history. This time, I had something better: information. You see, after Karen's downfall, a lot of HOA members reached out to me privately. They'd seen firsthand how corrupt and manipulative she'd been, and they didn't want her son repeating history. One of them, a soft-spoken accountant named Martha, quietly handed me a flash drive one afternoon. "You didn't get this from me," she said. The drive contained internal HOA documents, budgets, emails, and even Karen's archived correspondences before her resignation. What I found inside made my jaw drop. Karen had been skimming funds. Nothing huge, but enough to add up: community beautification expenses that mysteriously matched purchases from home improvement stores, maintenance contracts with companies that didn't exist, even reimbursements for safety patrol fuel expenses when she didn't even own a patrol car. And here's where it got interesting: Bryce had just reactivated some of those same accounts. So, I did what any rational man with a strong sense of poetic justice would do: I exposed him. But not publicly, not yet. I started small. Anonymous tips to residents. Little whispers at the next HOA meeting. Screenshots sent to people who cared about transparency. Within a month, the buzz, pun intended, was everywhere. People started asking questions. Why are we paying for services we never see? Where's the beautification money actually going? Bryce tried to bluff his way through it, claiming it was legacy spending from the previous board. But the evidence was too clear, too detailed. When the local reporter, Jake, caught wind of it, he called me again. "You sitting on another suburban scandal, Fletcher?" "Something like that," I said, smiling. The next segment hit harder than the first. It aired on a Friday night under the title, "The Buzz Returns: HOA Nepotism and Corruption in Oak Ridge." Bryce's face was on the screen, his defensive interview clips juxtaposed with screenshots of bank statements and emails. He looked like a kid caught stealing candy, except the candy was community money. By Monday morning, his phone was blowing up. He tried to call an emergency HOA meeting, but half the board didn't even show up. The other half resigned. Within a week, Bryce stepped down voluntarily, citing health reasons. And just like that, the Langston dynasty was over. I'd like to say I felt victorious, but mostly, I felt tired. Winning against people like that isn't satisfying, it's just exhausting. It's like cleaning up honey, sticky, endless, and no matter how much you wipe, there's always a little left. After everything, I wanted peace, genuine peace this time. I started taking early morning walks, breathing in the quiet. The air smelled like grass and dew, not tension. Claire and I began tending to a small backyard garden: tomatoes, peppers, basil, and of course, a few patches of flowers for the bees. Sometimes, I'd stand at the edge of the yard, watching the mailbox at sunrise, thinking about how something as simple as that metal box had become the symbol of everything wrong, and everything right, about Oak Ridge. The neighbors started a new tradition, the annual Bee Festival. It began as a joke, a barbecue and picnic event to celebrate community harmony. But soon it grew. Families brought honey-themed desserts, kids wore yellow shirts, and someone even showed up in a bee costume. The first year, they asked me to make a small speech. I kept it short. Sometimes, I said, you have to get stung to learn what peace really feels like. The crowd laughed and cheered. And for the first time, Oak Ridge wasn't divided by rules, it was united by a story. But even as laughter echoed across the park, I couldn't shake a strange feeling, that faint, restless buzz in the back of my mind. It wasn't the bees this time. It was instinct. Because I knew people like Karen, they don't just fade quietly into retirement. And sure enough, a few weeks later, I found out she'd moved to the next town over. A neighbor from there, someone who'd seen the viral news stories, messaged me online, "Hey, aren't you the bee mailbox guy? Guess what? The lady from your HOA is running ours now." I stared at the message for a long time before showing Claire. She burst out laughing. "You're kidding." "I wish I was," I said. "Looks like she found a new hive." We laughed about it, but part of me couldn't help but feel sorry for her new neighbors. Still, maybe, just maybe, she'd learned something from the chaos she caused here. Maybe her obsession with control had finally burned itself out. And if not, well, I figured karma would handle it. Over the following months, life returned to normal completely. I started a small YouTube channel documenting my woodworking projects, mostly mailboxes, birdhouses, and small home repairs. People loved the bee story origin, and before I knew it, the channel had thousands of subscribers. I wasn't trying to go viral again, but the irony of it all wasn't lost on me. The man whose mailbox started a suburban war had turned it into a business. One evening, as I filmed a new video about building a weatherproof mailbox stand, I noticed something fluttering at the edge of the yard. A small honeybee, landing softly on the lavender. I smiled. "Back again, huh?" I muttered. Claire came out with 2 glasses of lemonade. "Talking to the bees again?" "Just making sure they know they're safe here." She grinned. "You and those bees, maybe it's time you got a real hive." I thought about it, and a week later, I did. A small, safe setup at the far edge of the yard, managed with care and respect. It felt poetic, a circle closing. From using bees as a joke to protecting them for real. The hive thrived. So did we. And sometimes, late in the evening, I'd sit on the porch, the low hum of bees in the distance, and think about how one woman's obsession turned into my unexpected purpose. Karen had tried to control me with rules. But in the end, all she'd done was teach me how to live freely. Months passed peacefully after Bryce's downfall, and the HOA of Oak Ridge finally became what it should have been from the beginning, a community organization, not a dictatorship. The meetings were friendly, transparent, and focused on real neighborhood improvement, not ego-driven control. The air around the place just felt lighter. People planted gardens, painted fences, and smiled again when they passed one another. It wasn't perfect, but it was human, and that was enough. Still, life had a funny way of reminding me that peace was temporary, especially when someone like Karen Langston existed in the world. One breezy afternoon in early spring, I was trimming the hedges when Claire came out with a concerned look on her face and her phone in her hand. "You're not going to believe this," she said, holding it out. The screen showed a Facebook post shared by someone in the next town over, Maple Grove HOA. The caption read, "New president, same problems. Meet Karen Langston, our fearless leader." The post had over 300 comments, most of them less than kind. The people of Maple Grove were already learning what we in Oak Ridge had endured for years. I chuckled, shaking my head. Guess she couldn't stay away from power for long. Claire sighed. "That woman's allergic to humility. I feel bad for them." But curiosity got the better of me. I followed the Maple Grove community page for a few weeks. The patterns were the same: overregulation, citations for nonsense violations, and arguments about mailboxes. It was déjà vu with a different zip code. The comments read like a script from my past. She threatened to fine me for having a pink wreath. She took photos of my front yard without permission. She's obsessed with the mailboxes. And there it was again, the mailboxes. It was almost poetic. I could have ignored it. I could have stayed out of it completely. But when one Maple Grove resident posted a photo of Karen standing beside a mailbox with a clipboard, glaring at it like it owed her rent, I couldn't resist. Under the post, I typed one simple comment: "If she starts checking inside them, tell her to watch for bees." The post exploded. Hundreds of laughing emojis, replies, and tags later, my inbox was flooded with messages from Maple Grove residents wanting to know the bee story. So, I told them, not to embarrass Karen, but to warn them. The story went viral again. Local news stations picked it up as a "suburban legend returns, peace." Suddenly, Karen Langston's name was trending for all the wrong reasons, again. This time, she didn't take it quietly. 2 days after the segment aired, I got a certified letter in the mail, an official-looking document stamped with her new HOA seal. Inside was a cease and desist notice, accusing me of defamation, libel, and harassment. Claire laughed so hard she nearly dropped her coffee. She's trying to sue you again? Over mailboxes? Apparently, yes, I said, scanning the letter. It was written in her unmistakable tone, smug, threatening, and dramatic. The best part? It wasn't even legally valid. The letter was sent by her HOA office, not an attorney. So I did what any rational man would do, I framed it and hung it in my workshop. That should have been the end of it. But when someone's ego is bruised that badly, they tend to double down. A week later, a local journalist reached out to me again, Jake, the same guy who'd covered both of the previous scandals. Fletcher, he said over the phone, you sitting down? Should I be? He chuckled. Karen's claiming the B story was fake. Says you fabricated the whole thing to slander her. I rolled my eyes. You were literally there when she tried to sue me the first time. Yeah, but she's telling people I made the story up too. I'm thinking of running a follow-up, want in? I hesitated for a moment. I didn't want to drag it all back up again. But then I thought about all the homeowners in Maple Grove who were now living the same nightmare we'd endured, the petty citations, the surveillance, the fear of a woman with too much free time and too little empathy. Yeah, I finally said. Let's finish this once and for all. The next week, the story aired, The Return of the HOA Queen, How One Woman Never Learned Her Lesson. The segment was brutal. It featured interviews from both Oak Ridge and Maple Grove residents, clips from the viral B story, and even snippets from Karen's on-camera tirades. By the end of it, the narrative was clear. Karen Langston wasn't a misunderstood leader, she was an unrelenting control addict. The fallout was immediate. The Maple Grove board called an emergency meeting. Within 3 days, she was voted out, again. This time, permanently. When Jake called me afterward, he was grinning through the phone. You realize you're basically the HOA's kryptonite, right? Guess I'm just allergic to tyranny, I said. After that, the saga truly ended. Karen disappeared from public view. Some said she moved to Florida to start over. Others claimed she was banned from joining any HOA board within the county. Whatever the truth, I didn't care. She was gone, and that was enough. Life finally settled into something resembling normalcy. I poured my energy into my woodworking channel, The B-Man Builds. It became surprisingly popular. I'd post tutorials on everything from mailbox carpentry to bee-friendly garden boxes, sprinkling in bits of humor about my HOA days. People loved it. The comments section was full of support from folks around the country who'd fought their own battles with overbearing neighbors and ridiculous HOA rules. One comment in particular stuck with me, "Thanks, Fletcher. You turned frustration into something positive. You didn't just fight back, you created something that helps people." It made me realize that sometimes, chaos can forge purpose. Claire joined me on the channel, too. She handled the gardening side, showing how to grow pollinator-friendly plants, compost, and create sustainable backyard ecosystems. Our combined content became a little online haven for folks seeking peace, simplicity, and a laugh or two about suburban nonsense. We even turned part of our yard into a community garden. Neighbors came by to help, bringing seeds, tools, and stories. The same people who once hid from HOA patrols were now laughing together over tomato plants. It felt like a full-circle moment, a living, buzzing symbol of what Oak Ridge had become. Then, one late afternoon, as golden light washed over the neighborhood, I sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade and watched a few bees dance lazily between flowers. The air hummed softly, calm, alive, balanced. Claire came out and sat beside me. "Hard to believe it's all over," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "Feels strange, doesn't it? No more HOA letters, no more drama." She smiled. "Just you, me, and the bees." I chuckled. "Guess they're my real HOA now, honeybees of America. She laughed so hard she almost spilled her drink. Oh, that's terrible. But as the laughter faded, I realized something. The whole experience, every argument, every letter, every sting, had taught me a simple truth: peace isn't given, it's built. One choice, one act of defiance, one boundary at a time. The mailbox, once the symbol of my frustration, had become a monument of resilience. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd ever been pushed too far by people who confuse control with order. Sometimes, standing your ground doesn't mean yelling or fighting. It just means refusing to move, even when someone insists you should. And sometimes, poetic justice really does come with wings and a stinger. That night, as the last bit of sunset faded behind the trees, I walked over to the hive. The bees were quiet, tucked inside, working tirelessly in harmony. I leaned down and whispered, "Good job, girls. You did your part." Claire called from the porch, "Talking to your employees again?" "Yep," I said, smiling. "Best staff I've ever had." And for once, everything truly was peaceful. No HOA wars, no drama, no bitterness. Just the hum of life, steady and content. I thought about the irony, that Karen's obsession with rules had driven me to discover freedom, community, and purpose. She'd built fences, but I'd built bridges. In the end, maybe we both got what we deserved. I got my peace. She got her silence. And somewhere in between, a little swarm of bees changed everything.